Hey everybody, my name is Danielle Cox and I'd like to thank you for coming. And before I jump in, I want to share a quick story. I was trying out Gemini to help with my images, and I actually tried a couple of create me a slides. And so for this slide, I asked it to create me a speaker introduction slide. And I told it I would supply the bullet items and I would supply the picture, and it didn't listen to that at all. And it created it created some bullet items that were reasonable, that mentioned Flutter and stuff like that. It also came up with this picture. And I've got to say, I'm kind of impressed with that picture because I didn't tell it anything about me other than I think it knew my name. And it got the purple hair even. You know, it got the Flutter t-shirt, the purple hair. I thought that was pretty cool. Of course, I do have 12 fingers. So, you know, we can give it marks for trying. I'm so sorry, everybody. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about myself real quick. I lead a team of Flutter developers at a startup called Ardley. I am a co-organizer of the Flutteristas, an organization of women and non-binary Flutter enthusiasts. If you don't know us, we have a booth right over there. You can stop by and say hi. We would love to talk to you. And actually, even if you do know us, come by and say hi. We would love that anyway. We're hosting a roundtable discussion at 3:55 in the unconference area over there. And we'll be discussing the future of DEI. In my spare time, I'm learning Turkish. And after 3 years, I can say that I'm good enough that I can make my Turkish friends smile when I say something they didn't expect me to say. But I do have a dream of one day being able to give a talk in Turkey in Turkish. And hopefully that'll happen. And then probably the most relevant for this talk is I truly despise working with JSON. But what can we do? As developers, we can't escape it. So the question is, how can we make it less painful? So to continue with my earlier story, I also asked Gemini to help me with this slide. And if you look at it, it starts off reasonable, but then it introduces some non-words later on. But anyway, it's good enough for this part. And it also attributed it to the Dart language futures team. So maybe later someone can tell me if that team even exists. I don't know. But the future is metaprogramming. No more build runner. Things simply work live as you're coding. How cool is that? Well, we all know what happened to that. So that got deferred. I guess technically, if hopefully Andrew's not listening, because he'd probably want me to talk about how, well, it didn't really get canceled. We're keeping whatever. But anyway, so let's set the stage for our talk today. The good news is the ecosystem already has incredibly powerful, if not elegant, solutions. And there's more on the horizon. And so that's our path forward today. We're going to take a quick journey through the past, present, and future to see how modern Dart features can fulfill the spirit of macros and end with some advanced techniques that you'll be able to use, if not today, soon. And as an aside, this is my first ever lightning talk, so I've been struggling with getting the information out versus going down rabbit holes. So let me know later how you think I did. So we're going to start off with reviewing kind of what the dream of macros were. I know many of us in the community were really looking forward to the experimental macros feature, and it promised to solve a lot of problems around writing repetitive code. To move on, we need to acknowledge what we were trying to accomplish. And next, okay, again, working with JSON is miserable. Can I get an amen? Manually creating all that boilerplate often feels like it's just piling onto that misery. And then we'll talk a little bit about the path forward, what we can do today and hopefully tomorrow, and I will provide some recommendations. So let's start looking at the original dream of macros. And I've taken this from the message about them deferring macros. And so when they announced they were deferring them, they didn't just take something away. They also tried to give us a clear vision for what they would still give us. And they focused on two promises. And so I'm going to read this quote directly. One area we'll be investing in is better support for data in Dart. This is the most requested issue across the Dart and Flutter issue trackers. In fact, our primary motivation for macros was to provide better data handling, serialization, and deserialization. We will still pursue better data, but we intend to do so with more bespoke language features. So that was the first promise. And continuing on, another area we'll be investing in is improving build times and the overall code generation experience. We've already identified improvements for Build Runner. We also plan to ship augmentations, a feature we prototyped as part of macros. We believe this language feature stands on its own and will improve existing code generation. We still aim to ship this feature independently. So that's basically the two things that are kind of relevant to what we're going on with. So if we're talking about serializing and deserializing, it all starts with Dart convert. And it's the foundation of everything is following regarding JSON serializing and deserializing. At its heart, convert simply changes the data element from one representation to another. This could be very simple like character sets or more dramatic like JSON. And so the way that you encode a class in JSON is simple. You call JSON encode and pass it your JSON map. Wait a second, what map? Well, you need to write code that will generate, you need to write or generate code that's going to convert your data into a map string dynamic. And then you attach that encode method to your class as a method. And using JSON decode is just as easy. You create code that takes a map and can convert it into your particular class. And then you get to make a choice as to whether you use a factory constructor or a static method in your class. And I'm giving a couple of examples, so I'll use it both ways for you to see. Okay, so all we have to do is create a to JSON and from JSON, right? Easy peasy. Oh, if it were only that trivial, we wouldn't need this talk, and who knows, macros might never have been thought of. So the first way is to just simply manually create the methods. For a small class and a small app, this might very well be the best way to go. There are no dependencies. You have full control over how everything is encoded, decoded. If you want your date to be a string, easy peasy. You want it to be seconds from the epoch, even easier. And as your app grows, though, this becomes incredibly tedious and error prone. And a quick pro tip, if you're working on a team, pick one serialization method and stick with it. Mixing styles creates a huge maintenance headache. So the JSON serializable is the other way to do this, and that's the way I think we're probably most familiar with it. In full disclosure, this is how all of the code that we currently have at Ardley is done. I, like many, was waiting for macros, but this is the battle-tested reality. And this reduces boilerplate, although it adds some in other places. And this is especially true if you need custom code to generate your JSON. As an example, we have tools in our API structure that are represented by, or I'm sorry, we have bools. I can't read. We have bools in our API structure that are represented by yes and no. So we have a function that handles that conversion, and we have to still manually specify this for each of these indicators. Everything is accomplished via build runner and the resulting generated code. And while it's not full control per se, it is highly configurable. And by the way, if you need that control somewhere, you could still write your own to or from JSON methods, and convert will automatically pick them up. And this has been the standard basically for JSON since I've been working with Flutter. So here's an example of what we could add to our class to manually support JSON encoding and decoding. You may be thinking, this isn't that bad, so why are we even bothering with all of this? Well, there are a few things that make this less than optimal. If we add a new property, we have increased the number of places in the code we have to change. Since the keys are just strings, it is very easy to make mistakes. And probably the thing that makes this the biggest non-starter to me is that what starts to happen as soon as we have nested classes and you start adding complexity that way, it's just a lot to keep track of manually. And so here's how that same user class would look like with JSON serializable. And this is where I'd like to get a little opinionated, based on years of dealing with real-world APIs. I'm paranoid. I never trust an external data source to be perfect. The API docs may say a field is required, but what happens when a bug or the back end sends it back as null? And the architect of our back end, actually, we use it Ardley, is here now, and I think he would agree with that. He smiled when I showed him this part of the slide. And then another annotation we almost always use is include if null false, which takes it and says if it's null, I'm not even going to create that part of the map. So by doing that, in many of our classes, for example, those including the behavior of our app, there are default values. We don't include any of these as constructor defaults. We use like question mark in the code to assign default behavior. And by doing that, it keeps our JSON cleaner, and often, if something just behaves with a normal, vanilla way, the object doesn't even show up in our JSON. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so before we dive in any more code, I want to talk about the technology that I hope will revolutionize code generation in Dart. This feature is called augmentations, and it truly fulfills the spirit of macros. As I go through these points, feel free to pull out your phone and grab this URL. It's a live link to the official language specification for augmentations, so you can dig in as deep as you want later. Okay, so first we get seamless code integration. This is the best part. Augmentations let us spread a class's implementation across multiple files. It means no more dealing with those awkwardly named top-level functions like underscore, $, address from JSON that feel disconnected from the class itself. The generated code becomes a natural part of your class. As an aside, I plan on using this feature liberally in my port of Rogue, so if you want to catch that lightning talk tomorrow at 11:30. You can augment almost any class. Think about a class from a package you don't own, like Textile from the Flutter framework. How many times have you wished you could just add a to.json or from.json method directly to a class like that? With augmentations, you'll be able to do just that, dramatically simplifying how you serialize and deserialize external types. I say almost any, because although I don't see it in the specification, I don't see how we could possibly augment a sealed or final class that was in someone else's package. And again, because it's actually part of the class, it's explicit. So I think that just takes away a little bit of some of the obfuscation that might happen there. Like always, you can open the generated file and see exactly what's being added, but now as an augmentation, it should be even clearer what we're doing. And ultimately, I believe augmentations will be the foundation that the entire modern code gen ecosystem will be built on. This powerful, easy-to-use library, the powerful, easy-to-use libraries we love today are going to all be rebuilt on this feature, making them even better and more seamless. Okay, so with that in mind, let's see how this actually looks like in practice. So here's a very simple class that I augmented to create on there. And this is the part I'm really looking forward to. For a moment in time, we had this experimentally through a flag, but it seems to be back to coming soon. Let's take a look at how clean this looks. Now our person class contains an actual from JSON factory and two JSON methods as actual parts of the class. This includes, I am pretty sure, again, I haven't been able to test this, that we can reference private members even. And while it isn't related specifically to JSON handling, I wanted to show something I'm excited about. This example, I've added an actual new property to the class. Imagine that you have two apps, one that is a user level app and one that is admin level. And I can imagine this very well because we in fact have this. We have a workspace that maintains our current state. Today, even if a property should only be used by our admin app sidecar, it is available to our end user application Navigator. This simply increases the chances that we will misuse things in Navigator, and it also increases the confusion factor. Since the transition to sidecar is a one-way trip, we can just augment the code in sidecar and bam said the lady, if we have any Nathan Fillion fans here. The same class can be used in both places, but with proper encapsulation. Okay, so enough of dreaming of the future. Let's get back to the kinds of things we can do today. Sometimes the JSON map entry we are creating presents its own challenges. Remember the yes-no bool example? JSON converter is a class that can help us with that. And then I guess once we're done with that, we can be forgiven if we decide we just want to use a package like freezed. And it gives us a lot more related to our data classes. And I think there is probably a reason that it's a Flutter favorite. Okay, so for this example, we are serializing a date time object for an unknown backend. It seems to be traditional and simply wants seconds from the epoch. So our coding logic is easy. And once we've written this code, which should be pretty straightforward, we can simply plug it into our JSON serializable logic. At Ardley, we have all of our core logic like this in a private library, so now anywhere we want, it is this easy to handle serializing a date time. Of course, there are multiple ways to handle this. Currently in our code, we just have two top-level functions, and we tell JSON serializable to use them. I've never built a converter object myself, but I'm thinking that looks cleaner and may convert over myself. Okay, and as I said in the Dash the Wizard slide back there, we're maybe at the point of throwing in the towel and using a package such as freezed. It doesn't necessarily make our JSON lives any easier, but let's face it, we're using JSON to handle data, right? And if we have a class with data, we probably want equality, copy with, and just all the niceties we have come to expect with a data class. And so here's another example using a simple user object and how you would define it in freezed. And one last Gemini story here. I asked it to double check my work here, and this is a place where the hallucination still reigns supreme. Let's just say that it loves freezed and thinks it is the end-all be-all for JSON serialization, and it's convinced that it's currently using augmentations, and it wanted me to rewrite my entire talk centered around just use freezed. So I find that kind of funny. So, all right, so we are starting to wrap up. I'm going faster than I thought I would, sorry. But since we're stuck in the foreseeable future with Build Runner, here are some tips and tricks we can use. First off is you can tell it to watch for changes instead of just building the build, which generates the files once. This can help prevent mistakes caused by forgetting to run Build Runner. We've done that occasionally. I do encourage you to look inside your .g files and understand what it's doing. You will find that they aren't that bad. And just remember to never manually change one of these files. If we decided to watch for changes, the next step might be to configure your IDE to start this process when you open your project. This is something that shows up a lot. Your code generator may not follow exactly your set of lengths. Given this, you should probably exclude it from your analyzer. So this is what you want to add to your analysis option in the next slide I'll show you. And my final thing is the question of, do you generate these files when running your CI/CD pipeline? And as I've said, I'm kind of paranoid. And as much as I like to make, as such, I want to make sure whatever I'm checking in is what I tested personally. And so that said, I don't like running it automatically. But I recently was bit by a bug that happened because I actually was reading the class indirectly and not JSON serializing and deserializing it. So there could be some reasons to do that automatically, and I won't judge you if you decide to. Okay, so here at the end, I just want to kind of share a few magic incantations with you. The first two you probably recognize. Most of us can probably recite these during our sleep. And the only difference between the two is build runs it once, and watch keeps checking for changes. So I like to, again, I kind of like to know when things are messed up or changing or whatever. So I have never actually included delete conflicting outputs in my default run of stuff. But when I was looking at this, I don't really have a reason why not, because it'll show up in Git if it makes lots of changes I didn't want, and so might as well just run it. It doesn't hurt to do that. So I'm including it here in this example. The next two entries are in case you do want to automatically have this run when you start up your project. Instead of trying to include step-by-step instructions for both IDEs, I'm just sharing with you enough of where the actual changes would make. And it should be pretty easy to just Google it as a good starting point to find out how to turn this on. And also, if you want to exclude the generated files from your analyzer, that's where you would do it at. So that's pretty much what I have. I want to say thank you all for coming. That's my Twitter handle. My blue sky is flutterfly.bsky. Whatever it is, something like that. You should be able to find me there. That's my LinkedIn, and I plan on starting back up my YouTube channel next month, actually following along with my port of Rogue and some of the problems and solutions I've come up with on that. So anyway, that's my talk. I do want to throw out there, it is very hard to get one of our AIs to generate an image of Dash. Every time I would talk about Dash, it would come up with this like weird blue Sonic the Hedgehog looking like little guy with like a Firebase colored scheme shirt on and stuff. And it's like, so once I finally got one, you'll notice they all look very much the same because I say use this as the reference. This is the reference for it. So anyway, do you have any questions? All right. Well, thank you all.